Okay. Good morning. Thanks for coming, everybody. Um, my name is Walt Miner. I work for the Linux Foundation on a project called Automotive Grade Linux. And this talk is basically lessons learned from it's been 2 weeks ago, it was 11 years since I started with the Linux Foundation and Automotive Grade Linux. I was asked in December to give a talk to the ELISA group and NASA because they were starting space grade Linux and they wanted to emulate what we've done on automotive grade Linux as they create space grade Linux. And so they asked me to give a talk on the lessons learned. And so this is a little history here. This started off as about an hour talk. In Denver, they gave me a 10-minute slot, so I cut it down to 10 minutes, which is where you really find what the essence of a talk is. And now I've kind of re-expanded it just a little bit, but there is time for Q&A. So like I said, I've been the AGL Development and Community Manager since 2014, and that really means I do a little bit of everything, including shipping and receiving, driving equipment around, making travel plans, event planning, a little bit of everything. And release planning and things like that. Previously, I worked at Monte Vista and Mentor Graphics. I've really done Linux and embedded Linux since about 2005 when I started leading the Motorola's Linux Java phone group. I managed the systems engineering and software architecture teams. Did automotive with Continental and Motorola as well. And then if you go way back into the 90s, I was doing defense electronics. And if you really, by the way, this stuff is interesting, but if you really want to get me talking, ask me about motorcycles and motorcycle trips, and I'll talk your ear off. So just a brief intro to Automotive Grade Linux, in case you don't know what it is. Automotive Grade Linux has been around since about 2012. It's a nonprofit. It's hosted by the Linux Foundation. And we're collaborating with I'll show you some of the members. We're collaborating throughout the automotive ecosystem to build the car of the future through rapid innovation by uniting both the software and the automotive industries. And it's really kind of a lot of the lessons learned here are about how we united those industries and how we bring people together from automotive and from software, software vendors and open source vendors, people like that. We have 9 OEMs that support automotive grade Linux, including a large number of Japanese vendors like Toyota, Mazda, Honda, and Suzuki, Mercedes-Benz, and Nissan as well, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, SAIC, Hyundai, basically a wide variety of support from these companies as well as their tier 1 suppliers, people like Panasonic, Denso, Aishin, and others. People are always asking, so where is automotive grade Linux being used? It's being shipped in millions of vehicles. Basically, all of the Toyota line and Lexus car lines are using automotive grade Linux. Subaru has been using it for a number of years. Mercedes-Benz vans. And in the next few weeks, we'll be having another announcement about another OEM and Tier 1 that have incorporated automotive grade Linux into their vehicles. So we've been making a lot of progress over the years. We have device profiles. We have an instrument cluster expert group that basically has created multiple instrument cluster configurations, including bare metal and container versions of our instrument cluster. We can also run the instrument cluster in a virtual machine. We have an IVI expert group that's been bringing embedded Flutter into the vehicle. So Flutter, if you're not familiar with it, Flutter is the Google UI toolkit that you can use to create some really very nice, very beautiful user interfaces on Android phones. Toyota has led the effort to put Flutter in the vehicle. They've created a general embedded version of Flutter that a lot of people are using both in the automotive industry and outside the industry, and we're bringing that into the vehicle. You can also use Qt, by the way, for the instrument cluster or IVI out of the box from AGL. And we've created a gateway device, kind of a telematics device that does data collection and aggregation vehicle to cloud, telemetry, using vehicle signal specification, which is a specification created by Covisa, which is another open source initiative. So one of the few interesting uses of ChatGPT that I have is I'm getting old. You can see I've got a little gray in the beard now. I couldn't possibly remember everything that happened the last 10 years. So I used ChatGPT to help me create a timeline of AGL. And I actually use u.com, which has different LLMs. And I found I found they were just made up things, which were interesting. So between the various LLMs in my brain, I was able to put together kind of a timeline of AGL. It was founded in 2012 with the support of Jaguar Land Rover, Toyota, Nissan, Hyundai. But the first couple of years were really bifurcated. And by that, I mean, we had the guys the folks in Japan working on one set of things, mostly a spec at that point in time, and JLR doing another thing, writing a different spec almost, and creating some different code. Basically, they weren't really working together. And so in 2014, Dan Cauchy was brought on board. He was hired as the executive director. He's still the executive director and my boss to this day. I was hired by Dan a few months later, and then we made the decision in 2015 to move from Tizen. If you're familiar, Tizen is still around, being used in television, Samsung televisions, not Samsung, LG televisions. And we moved from Tizen and OBS to Yocto as our primary upstream at that point in time. We held our first all-member meeting, and at that time, we tried to wrap up that effort to create a spec. And the IVI system requirement specification was released that year. We had about 60% membership growth that year as well. And so as we moved from Tizen and OBS to Yocto, we decided to create our own distribution. We called it the AGL Unified Code Base. And the first release was Agile Albacore. I'll talk about the naming convention, but basically we use fish names as our release code names, and we've progressed alphabetically from there. We kind of have a bottom-up approach. Most technical decisions are really in the hands of the various expert groups that we've created. And really, we encourage anybody to bring in code. If you've got some code that's interesting to the automotive community, that's open source, we're more than happy to help you bring it into Automotive Grade Linux and get it working, and help you maintain that within our code base. We have an advisory board that's responsible for the overall direction and the budget and the strategy, a steering committee that oversees technical activities, manages kind of software feature priorities, because we do take membership dues money and fund developers to do work on AGL. So basically the steering committee decides how we're going to allocate that money, what features we're going to work on, and we have a system architecture team that oversees the end-to-end system architecture and consistency. We have expert groups that can run multiple projects, and the projects can be managed either by the SAT, the steering committee, or the advisory board. So, lesson one, after all that introduction, get everybody on the same page. Like I said, when we started, we had probably 15 different mailing lists. Many of them had only a couple or a handful of emails in their entire history. So we made the decision to basically cut down to a single developer mailing list that covered everything. Now, we don't do patches on our mailing list. We use Garrett for source code management and reviews. But basically, we've maintained that to this day for the next 10 years. We have a single developer mailing list. If you have a question, if you have, we make our release announcements all through that single developer mailing list. We add new mailing lists very sparingly. There were, when I first started, a number of component level mailing lists and expert group mailing lists that really nobody was using, but people didn't know where to send things. And then initially, like I said, a number of companies were focused on writing a spec. The problem with that was there was really no owner and very little coordination between the various people working on the spec. So I actually, again, like I said, I've worn many different hats over the years. So I took on the job of becoming the editor-in-chief of the spec and basically getting it done and pushing it out. And we got that done. It's still available. It's, it's got a kind of a view of 15-year-old, 10 years ago software. But we pushed to get the spec done and then get everybody focused on the UCB. So from there, we created this unified code base. And like I said, we wanted basically to unify the best of open source software into a single code base and reduce fragmentation and focus on innovation and new features. So what we've done over the years, this is basically where we're at now. We use Yocto with an open embedded, systemd Pipewire, which is for audio with WirePlumber, Kuxa.val for vehicle connectivity, Flutter, which is the UI toolkit, Jenkins. We have a bunch of AGL services that we've written on top of this, where there were very specific automotive things that we needed to do. And we have created a good number of AGL reference applications. All of this is available for download, freely. Anybody can play with it. And we're always finding that people are making use of this in ways that we kind of never expected. And we've done 2 releases per year, every year since 2016. We recently made release number 20, which was Terrific Trout. So we have, this is the AGL Aquarium. This is, a big part of my job, a significant amount of time is researching fish names and adjectives. And, so this year we did Super Salmon, Terrific Trout. Trout was supposed to be Terrific Tuna. We were going to have like a whole sushi thing going on. But Jan Simon, our release manager, when he first tested out the release, tuna as a branch name, things fell apart. There was already a tuna package somewhere, so we had to switch to trout. And then coming up in February of next year, we'll have Ultimate or Unagi. So some more sushi. And then Yellowtail will be coming up shortly as well. When we get to why, nobody knows that. I let out a secret, darn it. Lesson 2, embrace change. The UCB it's dramatically different in 2025 from what it was in 2015. But the change should be organic. Of course, you don't change things for change's sake. It should be organic via new or maturing technologies. And by that, I mean, here's kind of a picture of where we started and versus where we are now and how things have evolved over the years. Like I said, pre-AGL, we were using Tizen IVI and OBS. We created, at that time, especially for audio, and our application framework, we really kind of rolled our own. Because at that time, the view was Pulse Audio, didn't have all the features necessary for automotive. There was another competing thing out there by what was then Genevi, called the Genevi Audio Manager, but that wasn't quite ready for prime time. So we created our AGL Advanced Audio Agent, or 4A. That was really kind of difficult to maintain and really was not feature complete. And as the Pulse Audio community started creating Pipewire, we engaged them through Collabora and George, who's up here, and we sat down with Wim and kind of outlined what features that we felt were needed for automotive, and basically tried to push those requirements in to Pipewire. WirePlumber actually kind of fell out of that as the priority manager. But not only did we, a lot of times in open source, people will say, hey, your package does all this great stuff, but I needed to do this. And there, a lot of bike shedding about what your package should do. Well, what we've tried to do on AGL, like I said, we try to have a pool of money. We actually paid George and some other folks at Collabora to engage and write the automotive specific code that we were interested in, push that upstream. It got accepted upstream, and now we've incorporated that into AGL's unified code base. Other places where we've made significant changes, where we initially started using SMAC. Now we've moved to SE Linux. We had some older UI management technology. We've now moved over to an AGL compositor. We're using Wayland. Again, we had an old where we tried to create an AGL application framework. We found nobody in the automotive industry was particularly interested in it, even our own members. So we just moved to something simpler with systemd and app launchd. So you can see we've evolved quite a bit. And like I said, we changed from an FTE donation to a cash contribution model in 2015. The reason was a lot of our member companies said if you want to be a gold member of AGL, you can contribute 5 FTEs. One of the first things that I did when I came on the project was tried to measure how many FTEs were actually really being donated, and everybody was woefully under their commitment. And the people who were committed were not working on anything that was actually useful to AGL. And a number led by Toyota, our advisory board proposed moving to, hey, we'll pay significantly more money to be a platinum member of AGL, and we'll let you figure out, or through the steering committee, we'll let you figure out who to hire and manage the hires. And basically, it was easier for them to contribute cash than it was to contribute developers. We've analyzed potential packages for gaps in automotive use cases, especially audio, like I said, Bluetooth connectivity, but many other areas. We've engaged package maintainers and open source experts to close that gap. So not only Collabora, but over the years, Galia, Consulco, and others. And we'd rather push stuff, upstream first, push stuff upstream, rather than maintain code out of tree in AGL. This is just kind of more of the same description. So as we continue through the history of AGL, we introduced the unified code base. Toyota adopted AGL for their production vehicle, starting with a 2018 Camry. We, in 2021, formed a virtualization expert group, really focused on expanding VirdIO for automotive use cases. And we've done a lot of work, and we funded a lot of work for this. And basically, we have the ability now to run AGL in virtual machines on top of VirdIO. There's still some gaps there we're still working out with graphics, but this has been very successful. We've got the Flutter embedder that was developed and maintained by Toyota. We created a bunch of reference applications on top of that. We formed a software-defined expert group. Basically, that virtualization expert group morphed into what we call an SDV, or software-defined expert group. In 2024, we formed an OSPO expert group. And like I said, Terrific Tuna is version 20. We released it in July. 10 years. So for 10 years, we've done 2 releases per year. Lesson 3. So educate the industry. Very few automotive OEMs or their tier ones had an OS contribution, an open source contribution process when we first started this. And we know the same is probably true for aerospace companies and their suppliers and other verticals. This was kind of the impetus for creating this presentation. It's still, even after 10 years, very hard for most automotive companies to contribute code. We have, in some cases, had promises of companies making code contributions that never materialized because it got bogged down in their legal process. We've had code contributions that have taken us 2 years to get, and then by then, of course, it's out of date. So we formed an OSPO expert group as an attempt to fix that. Uh-oh. Okay, it's okay. I had we're doing I did not include the slide here. I should have. We have an OSPO expert group survey that is available. I'll put it in the version of the slides that I upload later. There's QR codes to the survey. So if you want to help our OSPO expert group try to figure out where to focus their efforts next, they'd help you. They'd appreciate your input. Yeah, this got. I lost something. There was a couple slides here that would better describe. The OSPO expert group's made a lot of progress in the last few months. They've released a slide deck to help educate senior management at companies about the value of open source in automotive, and a slide deck targeted towards engineers. They've got this this survey that's available both in Japanese and in English for people to respond to, and really, it's actually made a lot. They made a lot of inroads in just a few months here, and they're holding bi-weekly meetings every other Tuesday. Lesson 4: engaging outsiders is hard, but worthwhile. I mean, I think you all know that. There's this common open source myth, especially in the automotive industry, but I've heard it in other verticals, that there's just hundreds of developers out there waiting to volunteer for your project. Really, what you need to do is find those few that really are there, and encourage them to contribute. We have had good luck in AGL of people just kind of appearing out of the ether and making contributions. We had a guy from the University of Nebraska who, for a couple of years, helped us with a significant amount of documentation. We've had people who've shown up and for a year or two written significant amounts of code in applications or in services, who were not really affiliated with member companies. We, of course, make multiple channels available for engagement: email, IRC, which we've kind of stopped really focusing on, Discord, developer. I have a weekly developer call every Thursday morning Eastern time or afternoon here in Europe, or evening in Japan. You can call in. We run through the status of the various releases, but also open it up to anybody to ask a question. And we try to basically, if you're having a problem, we try to figure out a way to get you help or help you right there. The problem is, and again, this is probably true in other verticals, real automotive hardware is expensive, very expensive. So what we've made an effort to over the years is to find some lower cost hardware, like the Raspberry Pi, BeagleBone, or more recently, Rockchip, Nano PC, T6, or emulators to get people started. Because if you were at the AGL table last night, that little Lego block of hardware, that's $3,000 or $4,000, and nobody is going to be able to buy that just as a hobbyist. So really, working hard over the last 10 years to increase and improve engagement. Our Japanese team has been working in Taiwan and Korea and Japan to basically try to attract new developers there. Pre-COVID, we used to be really good about holding, say, 4 to 6 meetups a year throughout the world. We've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. I'd like to kind of re-energize that. But really, engagement is extremely important, as you all know. And then finally, this is the final lesson. Dev boards are not production boards. We're code first, but at the end of the day, we rely on the vendors for the BSPs. We're using vendor kernels and vendor BSPs. The Yocto kernel update cycle is very slow. I mean, we're using basically Yocto LTS versions, so every 2 years we get an updated version. If you look at Greg KH, he's releasing a new LTS version about every week, right? It's really rapid. We don't get those, quite frankly. And this is a problem that I've been trying to figure out how to solve now for 20 years, really. How do you get that the latest, you're using a 6.1 kernel, and Greg is releasing a new 6.1 version. How do I get to use it? Right now, there's so many steps in between, that patch release or that update and us getting a new kernel or a new BSP that we just very, very infrequently get updates. And that's not really the healthiest situation, especially in terms of security. So that's it. That's my lessons learned. Any questions from anybody? Philip.
When you're talking about the Yocto kernel updates being slow, are you talking about Linux Yocto, or are you talking about
BSP, the kernel BSPs.
the kernel? Okay, so it's the board support providers are providing the vendor kernels.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the vendor kernel problem.
Right.
What can you give me? Well, there is the software-defined wave in the Eclipse foundation. So can you give me a short intro what the relationship between AGL and the SDV project is?
So the question was, there's a software-defined vehicle project in the Eclipse Foundation. What is the relationship between AGL and them? Frankly, very little. They're not that interested in talking to us. We, on the other hand, we have picked up some of their software. Cuxa.val came out of the Eclipse Foundation. We work very closely with the folks at Bosch who maintain that. We actively look at other SDV, projects that they've got that they've created. The main difference between what they're doing and what we're doing is they've got basically a pile of projects that they haven't tried to integrate. And we're very thoughtful about what we integrate and making sure that it all works. And that's why, if we're releasing something, there's generally a reference image or an image that you can make use of that software, and we're testing it. We have not found a lot of use right now for too many of their packages. But as we continue to evolve, and frankly, they have not been interested in engaging with us. For whatever reason.
How do you deal with functional safety? Because that's basically the responsibility of the vendor, but you can support them.
So the question is, how do we deal with functional safety? So AGL is a member of the ELISA project, Embedded Linux in Safety Applications. There was an automotive working group there. We did a white paper and a project to basically look at telltales in instrument cluster functionality, and we published that with ELISA. We know that we're basically more focused on ASIL B at this point, not ASIL D. We do know that coming up in the next few weeks, there'll be an announcement from one of our member companies where they are using AGL in an ASIL B device. We know that based on the work that ELISA has done, that's very possible to do. You're using safety element out of context and things like that in QM. Regarding certifying the kernel itself, there's been a lot of work being done on that in the ELISA work group. We had a presentation at our all-member meeting last month in Berlin. It's available online about how to safety certify the kernel, some approaches for safety certifying the kernel. At the end of the day, though, the device manufacturer is responsible for the certification. All we can do is provide the artifacts that they might need. We're committed to providing those artifacts as our member companies tell us what they might need. We already produce an SBOM using the Yocto tooling. That's available with all of our releases. And of course, we're always looking at improving whatever SBOM output that we have, SPDX output that we have. Does that answer your question? Any others? Yes, sir.
The automotive space is also quite hobbyist space.
Mm-hmm.
How much engagement and what is the interaction with hobbyists and of value for them?
So the question is, the automotive space has a lot of hobbyists. What kind of interaction do we have with hobbyists, and what value is it to them? We get a lot of interest from hobbyists. First question is how can I put this in my car? And the answer is we don't necessarily know. You know, a lot of our work is focused on kind of next generation stuff. You can go get your software, you know, your open source software from your vehicle manufacturer. There are other open source projects that are looking at connectivity, especially CAN bus things, you know, CAN bus databases. We have had some hobbyists have come and engaged in and done some work. Again, this is one of those things where people don't tell us what they do. Sometimes they just grab it and use it, and maybe they tell us and maybe they don't, which is always, you know, it's kind of the unique thing with open source. You don't, you know, nobody's required to tell you what they're doing with your code. So I wish I had a better answer for you. Yes, sir.
Do jail is more about private vehicle cars or heavy-duty vehicles?
We've had interest from both. So Toyota's most, you know, private cars, you know, passenger vehicles rather, Subaru passenger vehicles. We've had interest from two-wheel companies. Suzuki is a member. You know, they do both four-wheel and two-wheel vehicles. And then we've had engagement from Volkswagen and Scania and what is their other company? MAN, is that it? And then Mercedes-Benz, trucks and things like that, vans. So we've had engagement from a number of those companies.
Okay, so if I want to draw attention to some kind of implementation, what should I do?
If the question was if I want to draw attention to an implementation, what should I do?
For example, implementation for CAN type of stack like J1939 or so.
So we right now we don't have direct support for J1939. Although we were talking to somebody last night, about that. So yeah, work with us, work with me.
We have kernel stack implementation for J1939, so getting more attention for this, more users, more implementations.
We have a connectivity expert group that looks at CAN connectivity specifically. Right now, we're primarily focused on vehicle signal spec and CAN connectivity using socket CAN. But we'd welcome, you know, any contributions in that area, in J1939 area as well.
Who should I contact?
Me. I'll give you my card afterwards. Me, Jan Simon, or Scott Murray, we were all at the table last night. Scott is the guy looking at the CAN stuff the most.
In the list of vendors of automotive manufacturers, is there any connection with the Chinese automotive industry?
Question is there any connection with the Chinese automotive industry? SAIC has been a member. We recently had a new member join EMQ. They joined a month or so ago. I think they're a tier 1 supplier to a number of Chinese auto companies, and we are working with them on bringing EMQX and some other of the vehicle to cloud and LF Edge technologies into AGL. And then we know, or they've told us they're working with a number of Chinese OEMs, and so we're hoping to get some more introductions through EMQ to get into the China market. It's something I'm personally very interested in. There's a lot of much more rapid advancement in terms of technology there than you see in the traditional Western automakers. And by Western, I'm including Japan, but. Yes, sir.
Hi, Walt. I'm Cody from the Zen Project.
Hi, Cody.
I'm curious, some of the car manufacturers are forward-thinking, embracing open source. What are the challenges, and how can we, as people in the community and employees, present ideas and kind of open the eyes to some of the other manufacturers to say, hey, this will give you more value, this will make you more secure, this will help everybody to embrace open source. What are the strategies that you use?
So our OSPO expert group has been tackling that problem directly. They've created a presentation that you can use and bring to your automotive executives to show, here is the value of open source. Here's how it's already being used in automotive. A very good case study to me is the fact that Toyota chose, when they formed AGL, their idea was we want to get our entire supply chain behind a single implementation of Linux. At that time, they had Panasonic and Denso and Aishin and whoever else and Bosch all created their own versions of Linux. And Toyota had no ability to say write an application and deploy it on these different vendors. Now that they've moved towards AGL and using Flutter, now they can write their application once in Flutter and deploy it to multiple vendors. It's a great case study. And speaking of Zen, one thing, I was really focusing on lessons learned here, but one thing that the SDV expert group and AGL has started working on is something called SODEV, which is an SDV reference implementation that we want to make available to the entire industry. Part of that is Zen as the hypervisor with Zephyr and AGL out of the box. And so we're working on what that looks like in terms of, we should have a new demo available. We've had some initial demos. We should have a new demo available for Automotive Linux Summit and OSS Japan in December. And right now, I'm trying to focus the team on what are we going to actually release in Unagi in release 21 in February. That is something that is SODEV. It'll probably be a, beta, alpha type thing. But then we keep, like I showed before, we're constantly evolving. So hopefully by the end of 2026, we've got something that people are really excited about. I mean, and the people that we've showed this concept to so far are really excited.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You mentioned Qt and Flutter. What's the rationale for both?
The question is, I mentioned Qt and Flutter. What is the rationale for supporting both? Not everybody's bought into one or the other, quite frankly. We started with Qt, Qt 5, probably when we first started. At one point, we developed a set of web applications. Nobody was very interested in them, so we kind of deprecated the support for them. And then Flutter came along. Toyota's heavily invested in Flutter. And we were able to take, the cool thing about Flutter is about 2 years ago now, when Toyota first released the Flutter stuff to us and we integrated it for our first release, we had this old Qt implementation that had been designed in 2016-17 timeframe. We asked a company, ICS, to basically start from a blank sheet of paper, create a new IVI UI for us, and we wanted to deploy that by CES. We went from basically that blank sheet of paper with their designers asking, what do you want, to having something deployable in 8 weeks. I mean, that's pretty good with a very, very few number of people. And that, we've continued to expand that UI ever since. So, and it's, unlike Qt, you don't have to worry about licensing terms, things like that. I mean, you don't have to worry about paid licensing terms. I won't say anything about licensing terms. But the Qt is a great product, it's a great product as well.